My name was Brandon, and this happened to me 3 Christmases ago when I was living alone in my apartment in Portland, Oregon. I had just moved there for work about 6 months earlier, and I didn't know many people yet. My family was back in Ohio, and I couldn't afford to fly home that year because I'd just started paying off student loans. It was December 23rd, around 8:30 at night. I was sitting in my living room watching Die Hard for probably the 100th time, drinking hot chocolate, trying to feel festive even though I was alone. My apartment was on the 2nd floor of an older building in a pretty quiet neighborhood. Most of my neighbors were older couples or families, and everyone seemed friendly enough. I heard singing outside. At first, I thought maybe it was coming from the TV, but when I muted it, I could still hear it clearly. It was Christmas carols. I got up and walked to my window and looked down at the parking lot. There was a group of maybe 5 or 6 people standing under the streetlight singing Silent Night. They were all wearing heavy winter coats and scarves, and I could see their breath in the cold air. I thought it was nice, actually. Kind of made me feel less alone. I stood there and listened to them finish the song. Then they started walking toward my building. I figured they were just going door to door, doing the whole caroling thing. I'd never actually had carolers come to my place before, but I'd seen it in movies. A minute later, I heard footsteps on the stairs outside my apartment. Then singing again, but much closer now. They were right outside my door. I could hear at least 3 or 4 different voices singing "We Wish You a Merry Christmas." I grabbed my wallet because I thought maybe I should give them some money or something. That's what you're supposed to do, right? I opened the door with a smile on my face, ready to thank them. But when the door opened, nobody was singing anymore. They had all stopped the second the door opened. There were 4 of them standing in the narrow hallway, 2 men and 2 women, all of them probably in their 30s or 40s. They were all staring at me, completely silent, not smiling. I said, "Hey, that was really nice. Merry Christmas." None of them responded. They just kept staring at me. I felt my smile fade because the situation suddenly felt really uncomfortable. I asked if they were collecting donations for something, and one of the men, the one standing closest to my door, said very quietly, "Can we come inside?" I immediately said no, that I was actually just heading to bed. It was a lie, obviously, but I wanted them gone. The same man took a step closer and said, "We're cold. We've been singing for hours. Just let us warm up for a few minutes." I told them there was a coffee shop 2 blocks away that was still open. The man's expression changed. He wasn't smiling or friendly anymore. He looked annoyed, almost angry. He said, "That's not very Christmas-spirited of you. We came all the way up here to sing for you." I started to close the door, but he put his foot in the doorway to stop it. I told him to move his foot or I'd call the police. The 2 women behind him started singing again, but it wasn't a Christmas song this time. It was just humming, this weird droning hum that all sounded the same note. It gave me chills instantly. I pushed harder on the door and told him I was serious about calling the cops. He finally pulled his foot back, but as he did, he said something that made my blood run cold. He said, "We know you're alone. We've been watching your apartment. You never have visitors. Nobody would even know if something happened to you." I slammed the door and locked it immediately. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the deadbolt. I grabbed my phone and called 911. While I was on the phone with the dispatcher, I could still hear them outside my door. They weren't singing anymore. They were just standing there, completely silent. I could see their shadows under the door from the hallway light. The dispatcher told me to stay inside and that officers were on their way. She asked if they were trying to break in, and I said no, they were just standing there, which somehow felt worse than if they were actually trying to force their way in. The silence was terrifying. After maybe 5 minutes, I heard footsteps going back down the stairs. I waited another minute before I looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty.
When the police arrived about 10 minutes later, I went downstairs to meet them. I explained everything that happened and they took notes, but I could tell they didn't think it was that serious. One of the officers said people do weird things during the holidays and that they were probably just drunk or looking for money. But here's what made it so much worse. The next morning, I went to leave for work and there was something taped to my door. It was a piece of paper with lyrics written on it in red marker. The lyrics to Silent Night, but with some of the words changed. Instead of sleep in heavenly peace, someone had written sleep your final sleep. Instead of all is calm, all is bright, it said all is dark, all is night. I took the note to the police station and filed another report. They said they'd patrol the area, but there wasn't much else they could do unless the people came back or threatened me directly. I asked my landlord if the building had security cameras, and he said no, it was too old for that kind of system. For the next week, I barely slept. Every little sound in the hallway made me jump. I kept my door locked and double-checked it about 10 times before bed. On Christmas Eve, I was lying in bed around 11 p.m. when I heard it again, singing. The same voices, the same songs, coming from right outside my building. I got up and looked out the window. They were back. The same 4 people, standing in the parking lot, looking up at my window. When they saw me looking down, they all waved at the same time. Not in a friendly way, in that slow, deliberate way that's meant to scare you. Then they started singing "We Wish You a Merry Christmas" again. I called the police again, but by the time officers showed up, the carolers were gone. The police said they drove around the neighborhood but didn't see anyone matching the description. I ended up leaving Portland 2 months later. I told people it was because I got a better job offer in Seattle, which was partly true, but the real reason I couldn't stay in that apartment anymore. I couldn't handle the constant feeling that they knew where I lived, that they could come back any time. Even now, 3 years later, if I hear Christmas carolers outside, I don't go to the door. I don't even look out the window. I just turn up the TV and pretend I'm not home.
My name is Ashley, and I need to tell you what happened to me and my daughter Emma when she was 5 years old. This was back in December 2018. I'm a single mom, and Christmas has always been a big deal for us. I try to make it special, even though money's tight. That year, I took Emma to the mall to see Santa. It was one of those huge malls with the elaborate Santa setup in the center court. There was a whole North Pole scene with fake snow, candy cane decorations, elves walking around, the works. Emma had been excited about it for weeks. We got there on a Saturday afternoon, and the line was incredibly long. I'm talking at least an hour wait. But Emma really wanted to meet Santa and tell him what she wanted for Christmas, so we waited. She was so patient, clutching this list she'd written herself in crayon. Finally, it was our turn. The elf helper, this teenage girl in a green costume, led Emma up to Santa's chair. I stood off to the side where parents usually wait to take pictures. Santa looked pretty standard. Red suit, white beard, jolly demeanor. He asked Emma her name, and she told him very shyly. Then he asked Emma something that made me immediately uncomfortable. He said, "Where's your daddy? Did he come with you today?" Emma told him it was just me and her. Santa looked directly at me again and said loud enough for me to hear, "Well, that's too bad. Maybe Santa can visit your house on Christmas Eve and say hello to your mom." I walked over and told Emma we needed to leave. She started to protest because she wasn't done with her list, but I picked her up and carried her away from the Santa area. She was crying and asking why we had to leave. I felt terrible, but something about the way that man looked at me was wrong. We got home later that afternoon, and I tried to put the incident out of my mind. I told myself I was overreacting, that maybe he was just trying to be nice and it came out wrong. But that night, around 10 p.m., my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole and my stomach dropped. It was Santa, the same Santa from the mall,
still in full costume, standing on my front porch in the dark. I didn't open the door. I yelled through it, asking what he wanted and how he knew where I lived. He said very calmly, "I'm Santa Claus. I know where all the good little boys and girls live. I wanted to check on Emma, make sure she's been good." I told him to leave immediately or I'd call the police. He didn't move. He just stood there staring at the door. Then he said, "I saw the way you were looking at me at the mall. Don't pretend you didn't notice me noticing you. I thought maybe we could talk." I was already dialing 911 when he knocked on the door again, this time harder, more insistent. Emma woke up from the noise and came downstairs asking who was at the door. When I told her to go back upstairs, she looked through the window and saw Santa. She got excited and started saying Santa's here, that he came to visit like he said he would. I had to physically pull her away from the window while still trying to stay on the phone with the 911 dispatcher. The man outside heard Emma's voice because he started saying things like, "Emma, come tell Santa what else you want for Christmas. I have a special present just for you." The police arrived within minutes. When the cop cars pulled up with lights flashing, the man in the Santa suit ran. He jumped off my porch and disappeared between the houses. The police searched the area but couldn't find him. They asked me to come down to the station the next day to look through security footage from the mall. When I went to the mall the next morning with a police officer, the manager told us something disturbing. The real Santa they'd hired for the season hadn't shown up for his shift yesterday. They'd been trying to call him all day. The man who sat in that chair and talked to my daughter wasn't their Santa. He was someone who had somehow gotten a costume and just sat down in the chair, and no one questioned it because he looked the part. The real Santa was eventually found at his apartment. He'd been knocked unconscious in his parking garage before his shift. His Santa costume was missing. The man who attacked him had stolen his costume and taken his place at the mall for the entire afternoon. Mall security footage showed the fake Santa watching families in line, particularly focusing on single mothers with young daughters. He'd been selecting targets. The police told me that 3 other mothers had reported similar incidents. This man had shown up at their houses too, all on the same night. They never caught him. The case went cold after a few months. The police said he was probably someone who moved around, hitting different cities during the Christmas season when malls are crowded and security is overwhelmed. They warned me to be extra careful and to change my locks, which I did immediately. Emma didn't understand why we couldn't go see Santa that year. I had to tell her Santa was very busy and we'd just write him a letter instead. She was disappointed, but she was 5, so she moved on pretty quickly. I, on the other hand, couldn't move on. For years after that, I wouldn't take Emma to see mall Santas. I wouldn't let her sit on any Santa's lap. When she got older and started asking questions, I had to explain what really happened that Christmas. She's 13 now, and she still remembers the night Santa came to our house. She doesn't remember being excited about it, though. She remembers me being scared, and she remembers the police cars. I've never figured out how that man knew our address. The police said he probably followed us from the mall, but I watched for anyone following my car the whole way home. I was careful, or at least I thought I was. The fact that he knew our address, knew Emma's name, knew we lived alone, it still haunts me. To this day, I struggle with Christmas decorations that have Santa on them, and I will never, ever trust a mall Santa again.
I still have nightmares about this, and it's been 12 years. My name is David, and this happened when I was 14 years old. My family has always been pretty religious. We went to church every Sunday, and Christmas Eve service was a big tradition for us. My parents, my younger sister Rachel, who was 10 at the time, and me. Our church was this old building on the edge of town, kind of isolated but beautiful. It had been there since the 1800s. High ceilings, stained glass windows, wooden pews that creaked when you sat down. On Christmas Eve, they always did this candlelight service at 11 p.m. It was supposed to go until midnight, ending right as Christmas Day began.
That year, December 24th, 2012, we arrived at the church around 10:45. There were already maybe 30 other people there, which was pretty normal for that service. Not packed, but a decent crowd. Everyone was dressed nice, singing carols while we waited for the service to start. The service began on time. Our pastor, Reverend Thompson, started with a prayer, and then we sang "O Holy Night." Everything was completely normal for the first 30 minutes. Then, right in the middle of a Bible reading, all the lights went out. The church went completely dark, except for the candles people were holding. Reverend Thompson said not to worry, that the old building's electrical system sometimes had issues, especially in winter. He said we'd continue by candlelight, which honestly made it feel even more special and traditional. But then, we heard the front doors of the church open. Everyone turned to look. A man walked in, silhouetted against the darkness outside. He was wearing what looked like a long, dark coat, and he was carrying something, but I couldn't tell what it was from where I was sitting. The man walked slowly down the center aisle towards the altar. Nobody said anything. I think everyone assumed he was just a late arrival. But as he got closer to the candlelight, I could see his face. He looked wrong. His expression was blank, emotionless, and his eyes seemed to be staring at nothing and everything at once. He reached the front of the church and turned to face all of us. That's when I saw what he was carrying. It was a large burlap sack, the kind you'd use for potatoes or something. He set it down on the floor with a heavy thud that echoed through the whole church. Reverend Thompson asked if he could help the man with something. The man didn't respond. He just stood there, staring out at all of us. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a knife. Not a small knife, a hunting knife with at least a 6-inch blade. My mom grabbed Rachel and pulled her close. My dad stood up like he was going to do something, but my mom grabbed his arm and whispered for him to sit down. The man started speaking. His voice was quiet, but clear enough that everyone could hear him. He said, "I've come to deliver Christmas presents." Then he kicked the burlap sack, and something inside it moved. Someone in the back of the church screamed. The man bent down and opened the sack. He started pulling things out and placing them on the altar. They were ornaments, Christmas ornaments, but they weren't normal ornaments. They were made from bones, animal bones shaped and wired together to look like angels and stars and crosses. He kept pulling them out, one after another, lining them up on the altar while we all sat frozen. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. I remember my dad's hand was shaking as he held my mom's hand. I could hear Rachel crying softly. When the man finished emptying the sack, he turned back to face us. He said, "These are gifts. You're supposed to be grateful. Where's your Christmas spirit?" Then he laughed. Not a normal laugh. It was high-pitched and wrong, like it was forced out of him. That's when Reverend Thompson did something incredibly brave. He walked toward the man and told him he needed to leave. The man pointed the knife at him and said, "You're a man of God. You should understand sacrifice better than anyone." Someone must have called 911 at some point, because we suddenly heard sirens outside. The sound seemed to snap the man out of whatever trance he was in. He looked toward the door, then back at all of us. He said, "I'll be back next Christmas. I come every year to a different church. Next year, I'll bring better presents." Then he ran. He didn't go out the front doors. He went through a side door that led to the church basement. By the time police came in, he was gone. They searched the basement, searched the whole building, but there was no sign of him. There was a window in the basement that had been broken open from the inside. He must have escaped that way. The police collected the bone ornaments as evidence. They tried to determine what kind of animals the bones came from, but apparently they couldn't identify them conclusively. Some of them might have been from deer or dogs or cats. They couldn't rule out that some of them were from larger animals. They didn't say it directly, but I got the impression they weren't 100% sure they were all animal bones. The investigation went on for months. They never found the man. They checked with other churches in surrounding towns and counties to see if anything similar had happened before, but came up empty. Whoever he was, if he'd done this before, he'd never been caught or reported. Our family stopped going to that church. A lot of families did. Within a year, they closed the building due to declining attendance. Last I heard, it's been converted into some kind of event space, but I've never gone back to see it. The worst part is what he said, that he does this every year at a different church. That means somewhere, right now, there's probably a church full of people experiencing the same thing we did. He's out there, and nobody knows where or when he'll show up next. I'm 26 now, and I still don't go to Christmas Eve services. My wife asks why sometimes, but I can never fully explain it. How do you tell someone that you spent an hour watching a man with a knife arrange bone ornaments on an altar while telling you he would come back? How do you explain the feeling of being trapped in a church with your family, not knowing if this person was going to hurt someone? Every Christmas Eve at 11 p.m., I think about it. I wonder if he kept his promise. I wonder if he's standing in some church right now, pulling ornaments out of a burlap sack while people sit frozen in candlelight, too terrified to move.
My name is Jennifer, and this happened last year, December 2023. I'm 28 years old, and I live in a small apartment complex in Austin, Texas. It's one of those places where the mailboxes are all grouped together near the entrance, and packages get left on your doorstep if they don't fit in the box. On December 15th, I came home from work around 6 p.m., and there was a package sitting outside my door. It was a medium-sized box, wrapped in brown paper with my address written on it in black marker. There was no return address and no shipping label from UPS or FedEx or anything. Someone had hand-delivered it. I brought it inside and set it on my kitchen table. I wasn't expecting any packages, but it was Christmas season, so I figured maybe it was a gift from a family member or friend. I got a knife from the drawer and cut through the tape. And when I opened the box, there was tissue paper covering whatever was inside. I pulled back the tissue paper, and underneath was a framed photograph. It took me a second to process what I was looking at. It was a picture of me sleeping in my bed. The photo had been taken from inside my bedroom, from the angle of my doorway. I was lying on my side, facing away from the camera, and the timestamp on the corner of the photo showed it was taken 3 nights earlier, December 12th at 3:47 a.m. I dropped the frame and backed away from the table. My hands were shaking. Someone had been in my apartment while I was sleeping. They'd stood in my bedroom doorway and taken a picture of me, and then they'd left, and I never knew. I immediately called the police. While I waited for them to arrive, I checked every room in my apartment. All the windows were locked. The door showed no signs of forced entry. I have one of those chain locks on the inside of my door, and I always use it before bed. I had no idea how anyone could have gotten in. The police came and took the box and the photograph as evidence. They dusted for fingerprints, but said the box was clean. Whoever delivered it had worn gloves. They asked my landlord to check if anyone had requested access to my unit for maintenance or repairs. The landlord confirmed no one had been in my apartment in the 3 months I'd been living there. They changed my locks anyway, just to be safe. For the next week, I barely slept. I pushed my dresser in front of my bedroom door every night. I kept a knife under my pillow. Every little sound made me jump. I kept thinking about that photo, about the fact that someone stood there watching me sleep, close enough to take a clear picture, and then they left, and I never knew. On December 22nd, exactly a week later, another package arrived. Same brown paper wrapping, same handwritten address, no return label. I didn't even touch it. I called the police immediately and let them open it. Inside was another framed photograph. This one showed me sitting on my couch watching TV. It had been taken from outside my living room window. The timestamp showed December 20th at 9:15 p.m., 2 nights earlier. The police started taking this more seriously. They set up a patrol car to drive through my complex several times a night. They installed cameras in the hallway outside my apartment. They told me to stay with friends or family until they figured out who was doing this. I packed a bag and went to stay with my sister across town. I didn't tell anyone except her and the police where I was going.
On Christmas Eve, my sister and I were watching a movie when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I answered, and there was breathing on the other end. Then a voice, electronically distorted, said, "You can't hide from Santa. He knows if you've been bad or good." I hung up immediately and blocked the number, but then my phone buzzed with a text from a different unknown number. It was a photo, me and my sister sitting on her couch, taken from outside her living room window, taken that night, minutes earlier. We called 911. Police came to my sister's house and searched the property. They found footprints in the snow outside her living room window, leading to the street where the trail disappeared. They increased patrols around her house too, but they said unless this person actually tried to break in or threatened us directly, there was not much more they could do. I ended up leaving Austin entirely. I moved back in with my parents in Oklahoma and found a new job there. I'm still living with them now. I can't afford my own place yet, and honestly, I'm too scared to live alone again. The police never found who sent the packages or taking the photos. They said it was probably someone who worked in my apartment complex or lived nearby, someone who had easy access to my building, but they couldn't narrow it further than that. What terrifies me most is how calculated it was. The photos were always taken at night when I'd be most vulnerable. They were taken from angles that required planning, required knowing my routine. And the Christmas Eve call, finding me at my sister's house that I'd never been to before, that meant they'd followed me. They'd been watching the whole time, waiting to prove they could find me wherever I went. I don't celebrate Christmas anymore. Last year, I stayed in my room the entire day. My parents tried to make it normal, but every time the doorbell rang for a delivery or a neighbor stopping by, I had a panic attack. I couldn't handle it. Sometimes I wonder if they're still watching me, if they followed me to Oklahoma, if they know where my parents live now. I keep all the curtains in my bedroom closed, even during the day. I check behind me constantly when I'm walking anywhere. I look at every stranger twice, wondering if it's them. The police told me these kinds of stalkers often stop after their target moves away, that the thrill is in the control and proximity. But they also said some stalkers are persistent. Some don't stop until they're caught or until they escalate to something worse. I think about those photographs every day. I think about the fact that someone stood outside my bedroom window and my living room window and my sister's window, watching us, taking pictures, and we never knew. They were so close, close enough to touch the glass, and we never saw them. I don't know if they'll ever find who did this. I don't know if I'll ever feel safe again. All I know is that Christmas will never be the same for me. Every December, I'll remember those packages. I'll remember that photo of me sleeping, completely vulnerable, completely unaware that someone was standing in my doorway. And I'll wonder if somewhere out there, they're taking photos of someone else, wrapping them up in brown paper, leaving them as Christmas presents.
My name is Nicole, and I was 16 years old when this happened, back in December 2015. I lived in a suburb outside of Chicago with my parents and my older brother Matt, who was 19 at the time. Every year, my parents threw this big Christmas party for their friends and coworkers. It was always on the Saturday before Christmas, and they'd invite like 30 or 40 people. That year, the party was on December 19th. My parents started setting up in the afternoon. They hired a catering company to bring food and a bartender to make drinks. It was always a pretty fancy event. My brother and I were expected to help greet guests and take coats and generally just be helpful and social. People started arriving around 7 p.m. I recognized most of them. My dad's work friends, my mom's book club ladies, some neighbors, family friends I'd known my whole life, but there were always a few people I didn't know, usually someone's plus one or a new coworker my parents had just met. Around 8:30, I was in the kitchen refilling the chip bowl when this man walked in. He was probably in his 40s, wearing a nice suit and tie, carrying a bottle of wine. He smiled at me and said he was looking for the bathroom.
I pointed down the hall and told him it was the second door to the right. He thanked me and started to walk away, but then he stopped and turned back. He said, "You must be Nicole. Your mom talks about you all the time at the office." I asked which department he worked in, and he said accounting. He introduced himself as Robert. We made small talk for a minute. He asked what grade I was in, if I was excited for Christmas break, normal adult trying to be polite to a teenager. Then he asked if I had a boyfriend. It caught me off guard because that seemed like a weird thing to ask, but I just said no and tried to excuse myself to bring the chips back out to the living room. He blocked my path slightly and said, "That's surprising. A pretty girl like you, I'd think you'd have boys lining up." I felt uncomfortable but tried to laugh it off and said I needed to get back to the party. He finally moved and let me pass, but as I walked by him, I felt his hand brush against my lower back. It wasn't an accident, it was deliberate. I went straight to my mom and quietly pulled her aside. I told her about Robert and how he made me uncomfortable. She looked confused and asked who Robert was. I described him, and she said she didn't know anyone by that name who worked in accounting at her company. She told me to point him out. We walked back through the party looking for him, but he wasn't in the living room or the kitchen or the dining room. My dad asked if he knew anyone named Robert, and he said no. They started asking their guests if anyone had brought a +1 named Robert. Nobody had. My dad found the man standing in the upstairs hallway, our upstairs hallway, where all the bedrooms were. He was just standing there, looking at the family photos we had hanging on the walls. My dad asked him who he was and how he knew our family. The man said very calmly that he was a friend of a friend and had been invited. My dad asked whose friend, and the man couldn't give a straight answer. He kept being vague, saying he'd come with someone, but he couldn't remember exactly who. My dad told him he needed to leave. The man smiled and said, "Of course, no problem. He was just leaving anyway." He walked down the stairs, grabbed his coat from the pile on the couch, and walked out the front door like nothing had happened. My parents immediately went upstairs to check all the bedrooms. My bedroom door was open, even though I'd closed it before the party. Nothing looked disturbed at first, but when I went in to look around, I noticed my laptop was moved. It had been closed on my desk, and now it was open. The screen was black, but when I touched the trackpad, it lit up. Someone had been going through my photos. My iPhoto library was open, showing pictures of me and my friends from school, from summer vacation, from homecoming. Whoever had been on my laptop had scrolled through hundreds of photos. My Facebook page was also open in another tab. I immediately changed all my passwords. My parents called the police and filed a report. The officers came and took statements from everyone at the party, but nobody knew who the man was. Nobody had invited him. Nobody had even noticed him arrive. It was like he just appeared. The police checked our security system, which my dad had recently installed. We had a camera pointing at the front door. The footage showed the man arriving at 8:15 p.m., just walking up to the house and coming inside like he belonged. He hadn't knocked or rung the doorbell. He'd just opened the door and walked in while the party was happening. But here's the disturbing part. The police ran his face through their database and found a match. His real name was Michael Voss, and he had a criminal record. Multiple counts of breaking and entering, burglary, and one count of attempted kidnapping from 12 years earlier. He'd served time and been released on parole 3 years before our party. The police went to the address they had on file for him, but he wasn't there. His parole officer said he'd missed his last 2 check-ins and had violated parole. There was already a warrant out for him, but nobody knew where he was. For the next week, my parents were on high alert. We installed more cameras. We changed all the locks. My dad even bought a security system for my bedroom window. I wasn't allowed to be home alone, and my brother had to drive me to and from school, even though I had my own car. On Christmas Eve, we were all in the living room watching a movie when we heard something upstairs. It sounded like footsteps in the hallway. My dad grabbed a baseball bat and went up to check, with my brother right behind him. I stayed downstairs with my mom, who was on the phone with 911. They found my bedroom window open. The security sensor had been disabled somehow, so it hadn't triggered an alarm. There was a ladder leaning against the house outside my window. On my bed was a wrapped present with a tag that said, "To Nicole from Santa." My dad wouldn't let me touch it. We all went outside and waited in the car until the police arrived. They opened the present while wearing gloves. Inside was a framed photo. It was a picture of me, taken from outside my bedroom window. I was sitting at my desk doing my homework, completely unaware I was being photographed. The timestamp showed it was taken 2 nights earlier, December 22nd. Under the photo was a note written in red marker. It read, "I wanted to give you something special for Christmas. Maybe next year I can deliver it in person. Merry Christmas, Nicole. I'll be watching." The police set up surveillance around our house. They had patrol cars driving by every hour, but Michael Voss was never seen again in our neighborhood. 3 weeks later, he was arrested in Indiana for breaking into another home. He had photos of multiple teenage girls from different houses he'd broken into over the past year. The police found a whole file on his computer with surveillance photos, social media screenshots, home addresses. He's in prison now, serving a 25-year sentence for multiple charges, including stalking, burglary, and attempted kidnapping in another state. But knowing he's locked up doesn't make me feel completely safe, because for those 2 weeks in December 2015, he was watching me. He was in my house. He was outside my bedroom window. He knew my schedule, my routine, everything about me. I'm 25 now, and I still don't feel comfortable with my bedroom window open, even during the day. I check every closet and under every bed before I go to sleep. Every Christmas, I think about that present on my bed and wonder what would have happened if we hadn't installed those extra security measures. What if he'd been able to get inside without us knowing? What if he'd waited until I was alone? What if he'd waited until I was alone? My parents stopped throwing Christmas parties after that. They said it was just too stressful, but I know the real reason. They blame themselves for not noticing he didn't belong. They feel guilty that he walked right into our house while 40 people were there and nobody questioned it. But how were they supposed to know? It was a party. People were coming and going. He looked like he belonged. That's what scares me the most, how easy it was for him to just walk into our house during a party full of people. How he spent time upstairs going through my things while everyone downstairs was drinking and laughing. How he came back on Christmas Eve and got close enough to leave that present on my bed. If he could do all that, what's to stop someone else from doing the same? How many other people have had strangers walk into their homes during parties or gatherings and nobody noticed until it was too late? I still look at everyone twice now, at parties, at restaurants, anywhere there's a crowd. I wonder if someone doesn't belong, if someone is watching, waiting, planning. Christmas doesn't feel safe anymore. It feels like the time of year when people let their guard down, and that's exactly what predators count on.